Welcome to Hub-Bub, the People's Podcast, where we engage our citizens and investors with the activities of the Planning and Code Administration and encourage everyone to contribute to Hagerstown's growth.
Well, welcome to the 30th edition of the Hub-Bub Podcast. It is December 2021.
We made it.
We made it.
Can't believe it. 30 episodes.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Was that 2.5 years?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is hard to believe, but we're having fun.
Yeah.
And thank you all for continuing to listen in and watch us.
Yes, and so this month's podcast is a timely one, we could say.
It is.
Centered around something that some people hate, some people love.
Mm-hmm.
Or where do you fall?
I don't know. Maybe we should tell them what it is first.
Okay.
And then I'll let you know.
Okay.
So I can talk about it a little bit.
Okay, yeah. So it's timely, it's December, it's cold. Some people would say it's appropriate for the season.
Mm-hmm.
Snow.
Snow away. I do like the snow. I don't love driving in it. Some people probably do.
Yeah.
But it's not bad. If I can, stay out a little bit and then come back in, get a little warm, nice and cozy, set the mood a little bit, it's fine. But I just don't like driving in it. How about you?
Yeah, there are fun things to do in it. I guess it has its place, just like everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, it's a good topic for us to talk about today when it comes to code, because like everything that drives what we talk about, the underlying thing, or if you want to put it that way, is safety. So naturally, when we think about snow, yeah, it's enjoyable, it's fun to look at, but like you said, driving, man, you got to be so careful.
Yes. Yeah, you really do.
Yeah. And so even when it comes to our neighborhoods and, whether it be downtown Hagerstown or residential neighborhoods, they do create hazardous conditions. So that's really what we're talking about today. A number of things. We're going to talk a little bit about other localities, what they do when it comes to snow removal, and then talk a little bit about Hagerstown and things that, as citizens, when it comes to removing our snow, what is it that we can do to continue to remain safe? So, yeah, a lot to talk about today. Sometimes when we think about, again, the city that we live in here, Hagerstown, sometimes we can think, again, that sometimes the laws and regulations, they're unique to Hagerstown. We're the only city that has these regulations. But really, quite honestly, there are other places many places throughout our United States that have similar regulations. And the same is true when it comes to snow. For example, in Minnesota, that's a place that's known for snow, so they're going to have snow regulations. And in Montgomery, Minnesota, when it comes to their regulations, they're pretty tight because of, they just have to deal with the amount of snow. So they're very strict, and snow has to be removed within 24 hours from public sidewalks. That's pretty tight time frame to get things done. Maine's very, very similar. That's a place that's known for snow. Portland, you have 12 hours to remove the snow and ice conditions from public sidewalks once the storm has ended. And when the city finishes snow removal operations, once that's done, so whichever those things take place first or whichever is later, that's when it's time to get things done. Montana, that's another place you can expect these types of regulations. 24 hours after the storm ends, you have to remove it. And then there's places that you might not think about it, but these days it seems like areas are getting affected by natural storm events that were never affected before. And we see that happening in places such as Texas. So even Texas has snow removal regulations. In fact, in Dallas, you have 3 hours to clear snow and ice conditions. Now, granted, they're not going to get near the volume, most likely, generally speaking, that we are. So they may have a tighter time frame because the amounts might be smaller. But another place you might not think has snow regulations is Hawaii, and you would be right. There are no regulations for snow removal in Hawaii, and even other areas like Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, and even some other southern states. So there are naturally states that, they're not going to have regulations because it's not an issue.
Yeah, and I guess that makes sense. It doesn't happen very often. When I was out in Montana, I lived out there a few years. You asked me if I liked it or not. It was so normal. out there. So everybody they knew what they had to do. You almost just live with it. I mean, there were sometimes the roads were just covered in snow, but you still had to go about your day. And while things were taken care of, you just kind of, you learn to go with it. You know, that's where I really learned to drive in the snow, because with the amount of snowfall they get and how cold it stays, it never really leaves the road. So, but it is important to, removing that snow from your sidewalks, as a lot of these jurisdictions have laws in place for. So why exactly do these laws exist? Sean touched on it. It's for, the safety. That's, with our job, that's where it comes into play. These laws exist to help property owners from negligence in a slip and fall case on a public sidewalk. If a person can prove that a property owner does something wrong or was negligent when they slipped and fell, such as snow and ice conditions on the sidewalk, a property owner could actually be liable for this. A local jurisdiction sets a reasonable time for our owner to remove these conditions. This way, there's a baseline for a reasonable time to eliminate a hazardous condition. And we are no way legal experts. We are far from it. But you should always talk to an attorney for a clear answer on these regulations and what your liability is. We will just advise you to be compliant with all of your local laws to reduce your liability as a property owner. And so some snow information here in Maryland, each local jurisdiction can create their own snow removal laws. So here in Maryland, the removal times vary between 3 hours in Baltimore and Annapolis and up to 48 hours in some neighborhoods in Bowie. Rockville has a scaled timetable depending on how much snow falls, with the time being longer for a snow event ranging from 24 to 72 hours. So that makes a lot more sense. They don't just have a standard 3 or 18 or 24 hours after a snowfall. It varies depending on the amount of snow that they actually get.
Absolutely, yeah. It's good to know that. And we share this information in various parts of the country and even in the state of Maryland, because it's just again, good to know that it's not unique to Hagerstown.
Correct. We did not come up with this, believe it or not.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's so important to be familiar with your local jurisdictions, laws and regulations, whether it be anything but snow as well. So what about Hagerstown specifically? Again, today it's flurrying a little bit.
It is.
So anyway, it's on people's minds. So what can we know ahead of time that will be helpful? Well, again, just giving a little bit of history, the first snow removal laws in Hagerstown that could be found were passed in 1956 for public sidewalks. And then they were updated in 2019. So the snow code was updated then. And the law has remained relatively the same since that time up until 2019. So originally the snow timeline was as short as 4 hours in our downtown and 10 hours elsewhere. That's a pretty quick turnaround. But what happened was we began looking at other jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. And when we compared those with our general area, we found we had one of the shortest timelines for compliance in the area and the entire state of Maryland. And in addition to that, based on our observations from years past, most people did not remove the snow from their sidewalks immediately because of a couple of reasons. The snow would start and then stop. If I see the snow stop, but I know it's going to start up again, why am I going to double work myself, right? So, that was something to take into consideration. And it was felt that there should be a more reasonable timeline that needed to be established, because it was difficult for citizens to really, determine what those timelines were. We had different timelines for different areas of town, for example, again, the city versus residential. So it just came to be confusing. So there were a number of things that we just had to look at and be realistic about.
Right. So in 2019, we proposed to our elected body to establish a citywide timeline of 24 hours after a snowstorm ends to have adjoining property owners to clear their public sidewalks from snow and ice conditions. This proposal was agreed upon and adopted by our elected body. The city adopted a resolution or policy in 2004 to guide our department on the compliance and abatement of snow and ice conditions. In Hagerstown, if a property owner does not remove snow and ice conditions from a sidewalk 24 hours after the snowstorm stops, the city can issue a notice of abatement. And what this means is that after that timeline passes, from the notice, the city can remove the snow and ice conditions from the sidewalk. And that might sound great. You don't have to worry about it. The city will do it. That's not the case, and it's not a good mindset. You will get billed for this type of service. And this resolution, it guides us by not fining a property owner on the first abatement during a snow season, but we can fine property owners on the second and subsequent abatements of snow and ice in the same snow season. So this means that in addition to a bill for the removal of the snow and ice, the property owner would receive a fine. So the fine is $200 each time we have to clear a sidewalk after that first snow removal. The snow abatement bill varies depending on the contractor, but we do charge a $60 in administrative fees in addition to snow removal charges from the contractor. It's always best to remove the snow and ice yourself or find someone that can remove the snow and ice conditions for you. It's not cheap for the city to come out and do it. It's just like when you're, summertime and mowing grass. If you're going to be out of town, if say you go down south during the winter, you want to make sure you have some type of snow removal lined up in that case. So this resolution also states that the city cannot abate property owner public sidewalks until all city-maintained sidewalks are free of snow and ice conditions. Now, we can still issue notices and property owners are still responsible for removing these conditions, but the city cannot abate conditions on other people's property until all the city sidewalks are cleared. The city does respond quickly to city sidewalks, so general rule is to make sure that public sidewalks are clear of snow and ice conditions within 24 hours after a snowstorm subsides. So just pay attention when the snow stops. From that point, you got 24 hours to get off your sidewalk.
Yeah. That's good to know, Donnie. And, with these podcasts, we just try to be as clear and forthright as possible. Right. People don't like surprises. And understanding, again, the whole goal of this is to gain compliance and to keep things safe.
Yeah, and you can see just here in Maryland how each jurisdiction, they have different guidelines on that. So it is, you want to know, put that education out there for everybody.
Absolutely, because just like you mentioned, homeowners could be liable depending on the circumstances. Correct. The city can be as well. Right. So it's in the best interest of everyone to do that. So we've discussed some timelines and how they relate to when the storm ends. And so now the question is, who determines when a storm ends? We all may have an idea of when we think the storm ends. So it depends on the jurisdiction, of course. But in Hagerstown, the city pays attention to the local weather reports and watches the radar. And so once no precipitation is seen or detected, then we start the clock on the compliance time. So that's the thing that we're looking at. Now, some of you, and maybe a few of you, tuned into the podcast with the question, well, what is the snow load here in Hagerstown? And when we say snow load, meaning that when a structure is built, it has to be able to withstand snow to a certain accumulation on the roof to be able to support that, because snow is very, very heavy. So here in Hagerstown, we have a snow load of 30 pounds per square foot for residential structures and 40 pounds per square foot for commercial structures. And this is one of the most frequently asked questions we get in our permit office, but also frost protection lines. So depending on the area of the country, the frost line or the freeze line is going to be so far deep into the soil. And so here it's 30 inches below finished grade. But that's one of those areas that you want to check with your local jurisdiction, because depending on the climate and location and so forth, that can vary. So it's good to be familiar with that. And in fact, if you go back to episode 1 of our podcast, we talked about appropriately the history of planning and code and jurisdictions. They adopt certain building codes in each area with specific requirements. And so again, here we have adopted the international codes, which uses a map to identify the proper snow load calculations for a particular area. And we use these calculations along with our history of snowfall in the area and including local input from local contractors to determine the minimum design standards. So it's a lot that goes in just to, again, not only make our roads and walking surfaces safe, but even our structures.
Yeah, that's a lot of great information there. So the next thing we want to touch on is local requirements and policies for the government to clear public streets. So we're not going to go into those details here, but if you were wondering, there are 110 miles of streets in Hagerstown, which continues to grow each year based on all the new development happening. A snowplow must go up and down each street several times to clear the snow and ice conditions. And they drive more than that, 110 miles during a snowstorm. Buffalo, New York, they actually started a pilot program in 2015 where the local government clears the public sidewalks from snow and ice for a small select area in Buffalo. And some of that area, the property owners aren't responsible for their own snow removal. They awarded a contract to a local contractor and was paid for by the city of Buffalo. Property owners were not billed for snow removal in a sense. Tax dollars are used for this removal of the snow from the sidewalks, and they've slowly been expanding the area that they are clearing. In 2019, they were considering expanding the program to include every inch of the city's 2,000 miles of sidewalk. This plan was tabled and is currently in the discovery phase. So there are jurisdictions out there that actually do take care of those public sidewalks for you. That's why it's important to check with your local jurisdiction. You may live somewhere where it's already being taken care of, but you definitely don't want to assume that.
Yeah, and, interestingly enough, Buffalo, I think it's an interesting scenario because they're the one that usually gets an exceptional amount of snow. So it probably wouldn't even be feasible for a lot of people. But yeah, pretty amazing what they'll do. So we've discussed removing snow and shoveling snow from sidewalks, and not to leave out when it comes to safety, not just the safety and liability of slips and falls, but we also want to focus on the safety aspect of being safe yourself if you're the one shoveling the snow. Unfortunately, how often we hear of news reports where people are injured shoveling their own snow, or they may even pass away because of just extending themselves. Health conditions. So, the fact is that when you're shoveling snow, it's a very strenuous activity. It puts a lot of stress and pressure on the heart and the body. So it's good to know that you're in reasonably healthy shape to do that. Especially if you're not one who exercises regularly, you go out and try to do a lot of shoveling, man, that can put a lot of stress on the body. So really, it's just good practice. Even people will tell you, experts tell you, before you go to the gym, get checked out by your doctor, right? So it's a good idea to be cleared from your doctor, you're in good state of health. And even then, being safe and being reasonable in your expectations, you want to, like me, when you go out and shovel in snow, you really don't want to stop till you're done because you just want to get it done. So you really need to pace yourself. You may even want to consider, even though it may be an expense, hiring somebody to do it for you. Find a relative that can do you for, find alternatives if you're not reasonably able to do that. But we wanted to share some nice tips that can help reduce the risk of injury to yourself as well, or somebody who's doing it for you. So here they go. Use a shovel that's comfortable for your height and strength, and space your hands on the tool grip to increase your leverage. Another one, before you begin, stretch and warm up your muscles with light exercise for 10 minutes. When you're done shoveling, stretch again. This helps your muscles. A third one, pace yourself. Take frequent breaks and prevent dehydration by drinking plenty of water. If you experience chest pain, shortness of breath, or other signs of a heart attack, stop the activity and seek emergency care. Here's another important one. Lift properly. Try to push the snow instead of lifting it. If you must lift, do it properly. Squat with your legs apart, knees bent, and back straight. Lift with your legs. Do not bend at the waist. Scoop small amounts of snow into the shovel and walk to where you want to dump it. Don't overload your shovel. This is particularly important in the case of heavy, wet snow. Another one, don't throw shovel loads of snow over your shoulder or to the side. This requires dress appropriately. Light layered, water-repellent clothing provides both ventilation and insulation. It's also important to wear the appropriate head covering and thick, warm socks. Choose gloves or mittens that will keep your hands warm, dry, and blister-free, and avoid falls by wearing shoes or boots that have slip-resistant soles. And this is a good one too. Try to clear snow early and often, particularly if a large snowfall is expected. It will give you the best chance possible to avoid the injuries that come with moving packed, heavy snow. And be sure that you can fully see the area that you're clearing. Adjust your hat or scarf so it doesn't block your vision. Watch for ice patches and uneven surface. So I remember when I was looking through this, there were things that I could apply, you know.
Absolutely. The one I struggle with the most is the early and often. Because I try to play it out. Do I go out early and, you know, get ahead of it a little bit and then, you know, have to do it a little bit more often? And at the end of the day, it's the best way to go, because if I wait till the end of the snowfall, oh my gosh, depending on how big it is, it could be, you're out there so much longer than you would have been, just because it gets so heavy, and at the same time, it is not healthy for you at all.
And you might be laid up for a while.
Might be, yeah. Can't go outside and play in the snow. So some people, they're fortunate enough to actually have a snowblower, or unfortunate enough if they have a large driveway that they don't want to do. But if you do have a snowblower, we do have some snowblower tips as well. So you never want to attempt to unclog the snowblower with your hands, even if you're wearing gloves. This may sound common sense, and it is. So you want to make sure you're using a chute clean out tool, or a long wooden handle of a broom, for example. You want to use eye protection during operation, and do not wear loose clothing, such as an unwrapped scarf, while using the snowblower. You want to keep your hands and feet away from all the rotating parts. The surfaces can be slippery, so use caution when changing directions or operating on slopes. You just want to make sure you're in control of the snowblower at all times. Let the snowblower engine cool before refueling. Take a rest of at least 5 minutes when the tank runs dry, and then add more stabilized gas to the tank. And do not start a gas-powered snowblower inside of a garage to avoid carbon monoxide exposure. And you want to keep both hands on the snowblower while operating the machine, and do not let the engine run unattended. And if you're someone thinking, you know, I don't want to shovel sidewalks anymore, but I still have to clear a sidewalk, you know, you could consider a heated sidewalk. I've never seen one of these myself, but at the same time, it's not something you really see. So how does this actually work? Well, it's, or what is a heated sidewalk first? These are the snow melting mats and or cables that are installed under pavers, asphalt, or concrete during any typical sidewalk installation. And how do these work? Well, these systems can be turned on manually or through automated control centers that can detect moisture when temperatures are below freezing. So they sound very cool. Have you ever had any experience with those?
Yeah, in my construction background and some other projects, I saw it in the system. I saw there was tubing ran into the sidewalks before the concrete, and water circulated through them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, virtually no snow or ice stayed on there. Yeah.
I'm going to have to look at that in the future.
Yeah, you know, it's additional cost.
Absolutely.
But that's the time to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So that mainly wraps up the main portion of our podcast today. If you like what you heard, or you want to learn a little bit more of what we talked about in previous episodes, you can find us on YouTube. We're on all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. You can follow us on social media by searching PCAD, City of Hagerstown, or the Hub-Bub Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And now we're going to Sean's favorite part of the episode, the weird news story. So the title of this one is Blizzard 2015. Yeti seen prowling the streets near Boston. So in 2015, parts of Massachusetts, they had a blizzard. So one resident thought it would be clever and funny to roam the streets in a Yeti costume. So I don't know much about the lore of the Yeti, but the Yeti, it's also known as the abominable snowman. It's said to normally reside in the Himalayas, but for this snowstorm, they made their trip to Boston. It was pretty funny. We'll link to the article in the podcast description. But there was a whole Twitter account for this Boston Yeti, and they documented their experience, getting turned away from different cabs and that kind of stuff. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, sounds like it. Sounds like it. Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, the next episode will be regarding nuisance abatement codes. What can be abated? So, as many know, there is a section of our code that basically a category of various nuisance abatements, and there are several. So we're going to talk about those. Of course, we discussed snow abatements in this podcast, but what other types of conditions can also be abated in addition to snow? So that'll be the episode to look forward to next month. Well, in a minute, we'll have our musical guest, but before we do that, of course, our podcast will go on next month, but it will go on without me.
Yes, unfortunately. Unfortunately, Sean will not be here next month on the podcast.
Yeah, so it's bittersweet. I'll be leaving the city, pursuing entrepreneurial things, and so looking forward to that and making that transition.
Absolutely. We had a great time recording this podcast with you. I can't believe we went 30 episodes and, made a little bit of history here. We had the City of Hagerstown's first ever podcast. Yeah. That's something I'm proud of every day, and it was a pleasure doing that with you, Mr. Sean Brown.
Oh, right back at you. I think it's expanded my, social skills, and, I've learned a lot as well, and it's been really nice working with you.
Awesome. Likewise.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yep. All right, so on to our musical guest, David Garastos, right out of Frederick, Maryland. This guy, again, just one that impressed me when, listening to his music. And what makes this guy exceptional, I think, is, aside from him being very, very talented, what he adds in his collaboration with a lot of other artists. He just doesn't stick to himself. His, again, collaboration with so many other musical artists in the area is pretty impressive. So, yeah, David Garastos, in his bio, started playing the accordion at 5. His parents apparently gave him an accordion, and he started playing at 5, started playing in public at 12, and just a really talented guy. Really focuses on the keyboard, does a lot of freelance work, but a variety of music, including blues, rock, country, jazz, R&B, and even reggae. And he's played at a number of events, including Imagine Hagerstown in the past. And in this month, he's going to be performing in Antietam Brewery on December 11th. So you can find him on all the social media platforms, YouTube, even Reverb Nation. So yeah, David Garastos. So let's take a look, listen to some of his music. Life on that ledge, she's too tired to try. Push out, beat down, and visionless, she's set to fly. The needle will sew you up, the needle will sew you down. Breathlessly, it will sew you 6 feet underground. Bring 'em back, king, bring 'em back. Bring 'em back, king, bring 'em back. Bring 'em back, king, bring 'em back.